Have you ever wondered what happens when someone underestimates a quiet, unassuming person sitting right next to them? What if that person turned out to be someone extraordinary? Keep watching to find out how one seemingly ordinary flight turned into a lesson the world couldn't ignore. Don't forget to subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what you think about this incredible story. The sun was just beginning to rise over the airport. It was calm, peaceful, and cold inside the terminal. A man named Samuel waited patiently near gate 37. He didn't wear a fancy suit, he didn't have bodyguards, and he wasn't carrying anything flashy. To most people, he looked like just another traveler heading home. But Samuel wasn't an ordinary man. He was the leader of his country, Kambala. Samuel preferred to live humbly. No cameras, no loud announcements, just blending in with the people. He had just returned from a diplomatic meeting in Europe, where he discussed important matters like gold sovereignty and the future of Africa. Now, all he wanted was to get back to his family. As he walked toward the plane bound for Lumbu City, he greeted an airport worker warmly in French. Bonjour, Xavier. The worker smiled back, completely unaware of who Samuel really was. That's how Samuel liked it. He boarded the plane quietly, nodded politely at the flight crew, and took his seat in business class, row 2A by the window. No one noticed him, or so he thought. A few rows behind him, whispers were already starting. A wealthy businessman from Europe, Mr. Laurent, the CEO of a major energy company, was also on the flight. He was used to VIP treatment, red carpets, champagne, first-class everything. But when he arrived at the gate, the airline told him business class was full. Mr. Laurent wasn't happy. Rules didn't apply to him, or so he believed. He stood at the boarding gate, tapping his polished shoes impatiently, arrogantly. "I'm a strategic partner in many African projects," he muttered to himself. He demanded a seat upgrade immediately. The gate agent scrambled, checking their tablets. But the truth was simple. Business class was full. All seats were taken. Still, Mr. Laurent insisted. That's when the airline called over a senior flight attendant. Her name was Danielle. She was tall, dressed in her crisp uniform, and wore a forced smile as she stepped onto the plane to fix the situation. Inside, Danielle scanned the cabin with sharp eyes, hunting for anyone who could be moved. Her gaze paused when she saw a dark-skinned man in seat 2A. Samuel sat quietly, reading something on his phone, calm as always. Danielle looked again. No expensive watch, no assistant. No sign of power, just a man in a hoodie. She leaned toward another attendant and whispered, "Probably a mistake." She walked over to Samuel, forced a smile, and said politely but firmly, "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Samuel looked up, nodded, and handed it to her. She stared at the pass, then back at him. The seat number was correct, but something inside her didn't sit right. In her eyes, he didn't look like someone who belonged there. Moments later, she returned with a fake smile, this time more direct. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we may need to move you to accommodate another passenger. Would you mind relocating to economy? We will compensate you." It was an insult, quiet but sharp. Samuel raised an eyebrow. "And why me?" he asked calmly. "No reason, sir," she replied, trying to keep her cool. "Just a small adjustment for our guest." "A guest more important than me?" he asked, his voice still calm. Danielle didn't answer. She only smiled. Other passengers glanced over, sensing something was wrong, but no one said a word. And Samuel? He just sat back quietly and said, "No, I will remain in my seat." The tension had started, but the storm was still coming. Danielle was stunned. No, a man like him saying no to her? She wasn't used to that, especially not from an African passenger. She forced a smile again, but her pride was bruised. "Sir, I insist. This is for operational reasons," she said, her tone slightly colder. But Samuel didn't flinch. He looked her in the eye. "If it's operational, then please explain why I'm being asked and not anyone else." Danielle hesitated. Around them, a few business-class passengers were now paying full attention. One man lowered his newspaper. A woman stopped typing on her laptop. Something didn't feel right, but no one spoke. Mr. Laurent still hadn't boarded yet. He was being held at the gate until a seat was arranged. Danielle walked quickly to the cockpit, whispered something to the captain, and returned with a decision. This time, she didn't say a word to Samuel. Instead, she approached another black man in business class, then another. She was clearly targeting only passengers who looked like they didn't belong. That was her second mistake. Samuel sat silently, watching. His face was expressionless, but his mind was sharp. He was observing, calculating, listening. The humiliation didn't anger him. It focused him. A young African man, maybe in his late 20s, looked confused as Danielle pointed at his seat. "You! Sir, we need you to move to economy," she said. The young man asked, "Why me?" Danielle said nothing, only took his boarding pass. That's when Samuel stood up. "Enough," he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "You are making decisions based on skin, not on tickets. That's called discrimination." Danielle turned, shaken. "Sir, I have to ask you to sit down. Please don't cause a scene." Samuel looked her straight in the eyes. For a second, her breath caught. There was something about his stare, steady, fearless, powerful, but she still didn't know who he really was. To her, he was just another passenger acting like a troublemaker. She walked off again, fuming inside. "These people," she muttered under her breath in French, "always making noise." Mr. Laurent was finally brought on board. Danielle greeted him with extra politeness, offering him a glass of champagne. "We're fixing the seating issue, sir," she said. Meanwhile, Samuel sat back down. He put on his seatbelt, his fingers calmly tapping the armrest. He didn't need to say a word because soon the entire world would know what had just happened and who exactly had been insulted. The plane taxied down the runway and soon took off into the sky. Inside the cabin, everything looked normal. Passengers relaxed, the seatbelt signs turned off. But beneath the surface, something powerful was growing, an invisible storm waiting to burst. Hours passed. The lights dimmed. Most passengers slept, but Samuel remained awake, looking out the window at the clouds. He wasn't angry. He was patient. And when the wheels touched the ground in Lumbu City, that patience would become history. The plane began its slow descent. Outside, the view was breathtaking. Golden sun over red soil, the city waking up below. But what no one inside the plane could see yet was a convoy waiting at the airport. Rows of black SUVs, military vehicles, and a presidential escort forming on the tarmac. Inside the cabin, whispers started spreading. "I see soldiers. Are we landing into a war zone?" One foreign passenger asked nervously. No, that's military protocol," another replied. "Maybe someone important is arriving." Mr. Laurent smirked. "Must be for me," he chuckled to Danielle. She laughed along, already preparing to walk him out ahead of the other passengers. But the plane had barely stopped rolling when the atmosphere changed. Out the window, passengers saw presidential guards lined up sharply, weapons at their sides, standing in full attention. Behind them stood Kambala's top ministers, the Minister of Defense, the Foreign Minister, even the head of security, all waiting in the heat, unmoving like statues of power. Danielle peeked out the window and gasped. "What is this?" she whispered. Mr. Laurent stood up proudly, smoothing his suit. "Clearly, this is for me. I told you I'm involved in big projects here." But before anyone could step off the plane, a tall officer in a black beret boarded the aircraft. His boots echoed on the floor as he walked slowly down the aisle, scanning every face. He stopped at seat 2A. He raised his hand to his forehead in a perfect military salute. "Mr. President, welcome home." The entire cabin fell silent. You could hear Hart stop. Danielle's face dropped. Her eyes darted between the officer and the man she had looked down on for the entire flight. Her hands began to tremble. Samuel slowly stood up, calm and dignified. Not a word spoken. Mr. Laurent took a step back, his mouth slightly open. "Pipri?" "President," he stuttered. Samuel turned and gave him a simple nod. Not angry, not proud, just a man who no longer needed to say anything. Another officer stepped in. "We have instructions," he said coldly, looking at Danielle and Mr. Laurent. "You two will come with us immediately." "Wait, what?" Danielle whispered. "Why me?" "You are being detained for questioning," the officer replied sharply. "You have publicly disrespected the head of state on national soil. That is a serious offense." Danielle tried to laugh nervously, looking around. No, this has to be a mistake. I was doing my job." But no one listened. Samuel stepped off the plane and was immediately met by his people, his guard, his ministers, and a cheering crowd beyond the airport fence. Cameras clicked. The nation's leader had returned, but this time, everyone knew the truth. He had walked among them as a regular man, and those who had judged him by appearance would now face consequences. Back on the aircraft, Danielle and Mr. Laurent were led away in handcuffs. Passengers watched in disbelief as they disappeared down the steps, heads lowered, their arrogance crushed. And that was only the beginning. At the Ministry of Justice, Danielle and Mr. Laurent were formally charged with public insult and discrimination toward the head of state. The French embassy tried to intervene, but Samuel gave a clear response. "This is not a colony. This is a sovereign nation. They will face justice just like anyone else." Meanwhile, Air France scrambled to control the damage. The airline issued a public apology, but it wasn't enough. Citizens of Kampala began calling for a boycott. Other African countries joined in. Danielle, now locked in a detention center outside Lumba City, broke down in tears during questioning. "I didn't know who he was," she sobbed. "I was just following procedures." The investigator looked at her coldly. "You didn't need to know who he was. You just needed to treat him like a human being." Mr. Laurent, facing potential legal action in both Kampala and France, tried to use his influence to escape, but the court made a powerful ruling. No immunity, no special treatment. Let justice be equal. Samuel never gloated. He never mocked them. He simply returned to the presidential palace and continued his work, building roads, empowering young people, strengthening the military, defending the land. But that moment on the plane became legend. A quiet man in a hoodie, a flight attendant with prejudice, a CEO blinded by pride, and a landing that changed everything. Moral lesson: true dignity comes from treating everyone with respect, regardless of appearances. Power and humility can coexist, and justice prevails when we stand firm in our values.